Good morning, Mountain View. I am Brick, like Chelsea said, and some of you guys are like, "What? That's not Todd." And you got a text message from the 41411. Todd sent out. He scheduled those well before he injured his feet or his ankles, and so he just wasn't feeling good enough to come. So he called me on Thursday and said, I want to be there so badly, but it's just not going to happen. And so be in prayer for Todd. And you guys are stuck with me this morning. But as a consolation prize, we have Jeanne. And it is good to be back here. We were in Malawi for 2 weeks. And if you guys have been around Mountain View for any amount of time, you know you've been kind of a part of that process. And we just got back on Monday, I think it was. And it was just an incredible trip. It was really, really amazing. We had 26 people go. And for most of us, we've been planning it for a long time. But Jeanne was a last-minute acquisition. And so Jeanne, why don't you tell us how you came on this trip and the crazy amount of prep time that you had, or not prep time.
I've wanted to come on this trip for a lot of years, and it's just never really worked out for me to come. It's not on. It's never really worked out for me to come, and I was talking to Brick on the Sunday before they were supposed to leave on the next Monday, and I said, "Boy, Brick, I wish." Am I on now?
You're on.
Thank you, Alex. I wish I could go, and he said, "You can." And I said, "What?" And I go, "No way." And he said, "Yeah, we had a cancellation, and if you want to come, you could come." And so I talked to my husband. I was like, "Can you believe this? Is this possible?" And he's like, "I think you should go for it." And so I started making the plans. The next morning, I went and got my shots and my malaria pills, and still didn't know if I was going on the trip, if it was going to work out to change the ticket. And by 11 o'clock, Brick said it's a go. And it was just kind of a miracle, the whole thing, the way it all came together in less than 24 hours. And I was on a plane that night, and it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was really cool. And looking back, seeing kind of how the trip played out, it's crazy how when you're just open to what God has, and to see, it would not have been the same trip without Jeanne. And so we're excited because we just have a lot of stories. And it's cool because when Todd asked me, he said, would you share? I know that we've been going through this series called Story, and we've had some just awesome people sharing their stories. But what happened there is really a part of our story as a church. And we went over there and we worked with Y Malawi. And just to give you a brief glimpse of what Y Malawi is, Y Malawi basically went over to Malawi years ago, over 10 years ago, and they saw a lot of people working for the common good of Malawi, but they noticed that they were working towards the same thing, but they weren't working alongside of each other. And so, and then John Gash came back here and said, "Man, the same thing's happening here. There's a lot of churches in the U.S., and we're all want to do something, but there's not so much cohesion on working together." And so, Y Malawi is the bridge. And so their goal is to get churches to work together, and then to get the partners to work together. So we're a part of the partnership in the U.S., and we work with a group of partners that are working in Malawi. 4 partners that we worked closely with. I think there's 7 total. But we worked with Fishers Trainers Senders, or FTS. And you're going to hear stories of this South African named Louise, who's just an incredible woman. And her organization is Fishers Trainers Senders. They want to reach people for the gospel. They want to fish, just as Jesus told. And then they want to just not catch and show people the gospel, but they want to train them up and then send them back out. And so we're working alongside these people from Malawi as they're being sent back out. Then we work with the youth, and it's basically the youth of Malawi that are same purpose and goals, but concentrated on the youth. And then Chiefs Ministry, which they found that if they could reach people for God, it's cool. But once they go back into their villages, the chief has so much sway that they could kind of just say, "No Bibles," or "No, you aren't going to believe that." And it kind of created these just little pockets of people that had to be in seclusion. And this guy had a vision of saying, "Man, we want to reach the chiefs, because if you reach a chief, you reach the whole village." And then the 4th group that we work with is World Vision, and that's where we work with kind of the humanitarian, the staples, clean water, food security, prevention of HIV/AIDS, malaria prevention, education, all of these different things that are the backbone of what we do over there as far as that stuff goes is World Vision. And so those are the 4 things that we worked with. And as I was thinking, actually, let's just show a video. We have a quick just glimpse of us working with, it's mainly with Chiefs Ministry sharing our testimonies, and then World Vision where we get to sponsor our children. That's how World Vision gets all their money, is they do child sponsorships. And so here's just a quick glimpse to give you guys a flavor of it. Those are just a few clips of kind of some of the things that went. But as I was thinking about what to share in the stories, God just put it on my heart that as we've been going through the series Story, that this is our story. This isn't just the story of the 26 of us. This is Mountain View's story, because it was a tremendous effort to get these 26 people to Malawi. Most of you guys are probably pretty fed up with our begging for money and saying, sponsor us, kids selling baked goods and having concerts where we fill the room with smoke machines and all this crazy stuff. But you guys gave, and we had rummage sales, and we did silent auctions. But it was this church that gave, that said, we want to be a part of this. And you guys played just as much of a part of this as we did. We were fortunate to go. But I wanted to just say, as we share these stories, this is your story. This is Mountain View's story. Ultimately, it's God's story. But it's pretty cool. And you guys have helped us out and supported in so many ways. And one of the common themes on the trip was that it's sometimes just the small things that we do that make the biggest impact. And some of you might be there, I only donated some old shirts. But it's the small things. In day one, Jeanne was reminded of this, and we read a quote in a devotion that we did that kind of hit home with that.
And it pretty much stuck with us the whole time. But they had this great devotional that we used the whole trip. And, it had scriptures and questions and thoughts just for you to, ponder the whole trip. And the first day there was a quote by Mother Teresa, and it said, there are no great things, only small things done with great love. Happy are those. I'm a crier, can't help it. And it really hit me instantaneously. I mean, besides, as the trip went on, I got to see this demonstrated in your kids who went, in all the partners that we worked with, in Brick, who is just such a selfless, humble leader. And I just saw it repetitively, but it really hit me right out of the chute before I even saw these things. And I think the reason it resonated so much with me is because it comforts me, that we can do small things with great love and make a big difference. I think sometimes we get intimidated, by seeing people do great things, and we think, I can't do that. So, you discount what you can do because it's not a big thing. And it's like, all these small things are what add up to make this trip. All these small things that you don't do on a regular basis are big things when they're done with great love. And you get such a sense of happiness, when you do something just because it's a loving thing to do, because you feel that love in your heart. And we all know that, but we can tend to forget it, and think that something much grander is required. And this was just such a simple concept, but so played out the whole trip. And I feel like you, that they were all part of that. They may not have known it, but we're to tell you that you were and are.
And we saw that time and time again, like Jeanne said, with your students. And I gave them a challenge of sharing their testimonies. I said, at any point, I might call on you and you'd have to share. And most of them were just like, wide-eyed, like, no way. And Jeanne overheard some people and was
so
just
I was in the back of the bus, and all the kids are really saying how they feel. I hope he doesn't call on me, and I don't want to, and I really don't want to. And, they were really nervous about it. And so the time came, we were at the Chiefs Bible study, and there was probably about, I would say, 300 people there, women, children, and the chiefs, and from all different villages. And Brick asked 2 girls to share their testimony, and the first one shared about how her dad had died of heart attack suddenly, and how angry she was at God and she didn't understand. And so she kind of started turning down a road just away from God. And she shared the story of how God wooed her back and showed her his love for her, and that he would get her through. He was her lifeline. And the second girl, I'm so proud of them. They were so brave. The second girl had struggled with depression, and so she didn't know how to communicate that with the Malawian people. She's like, how do you share that, And so she shared that, she had lost her sense of purpose, and she didn't have a sense of God's purpose for her life, and she had insecurities and doubts about herself, and it caused a great sadness in her life that she couldn't get rid of. And she shared how God brought her through that. And after she was done sharing, the chief who was interpreting said, how many of you want to know this Jesus? How many of you want to accept this Jesus as your Lord? And 100 hands went up. It wasn't like, well, yeah, I kind of want to know that Jesus. I'm telling you, it was just like, whew, I want what they have. And it's like, I know these girls felt like it was a huge thing what they did. But it was a small thing in reality. They shared their story. They shared their hearts, and they overcame their fear and their insecurities in order to tell God's story in their life. And it impacted lives for eternity. It was so powerful. It's hard to put into words.
Yeah, that was for sure one of the highlights, was just seeing the students share and step out of their comfort zones. And that same day was probably one of the coolest things that I've seen in Malawi. After the girls shared their stories, and it was cool because there wasn't like here we'll share a testimony and then we kind of explain and then we bring in scriptures, which is awesome, but we kind of like feel that need to put more onto it. And there it was, they shared their story, and it was, all right, who wants to accept Christ? And people just were, couldn't get their hand up fast enough. And so it was so cool. And so that group was about 300 people total. But then because of where we were, we were so far in the middle of nowhere that it was, they said we've heard about other places having visitors, but nobody's ever visited us. And so we're so thankful that you're here because we were so far. And because we were so far that once we got done with the little Bible study thing, we were going to show the Jesus film, but people had to walk 2-3 hours back to their homes barefoot at night. So once we stopped, people started leaving before the film started. And when the film started, there's probably about 75 people there, maybe close to 100 people that were left to watch the film. And we had already given an altar call, and so I was just sitting there glued in on this film. Obviously it's getting dark, and the pastor leans over and he goes, Abusa, which is what they call pastor. They call me Abusa, which is awesome.
And by the way, pastors are very revered in Malawi. Like the respect shown to a pastor, a seat of honor, the introduction to the chief. It's really cool to see how respected a pastor is, and how humbly our pastor accepts that role and just is so loving. Really cool.
It was cool. So he leans over, he goes, Abusa, you better share the gospel again. And then in my mind, I'm like, well, we just shared it. And then he says, there's way more. We had shown the night before we had shown the film, and there's like 600 people. And he goes, there's way more than there was last night. And I went, what? And I looked behind me, and it was just a sea of people, probably between 1,500 and 2,000 people that had shown up because they saw just a light, and they just ran. They literally came from all over, and they were so quiet. Most of them barefoot, and it wasn't the warmest night. And they came, and they were just watching, complete quiet and complete awe. And then once we had it at a point where we stopped the film, and he wanted me to share, and I had asked Beth Hall, one of the leaders, to say the prayer, and so I just gave a 2-minute gospel presentation, just very meat and potatoes gospel, right? And then I turned to Beth, and she goes, is there anybody that wants to accept Jesus Christ? And at least 1,000 people raised their hands, and some of them standing up. And it was almost everybody except this little pocket. I don't know what their problem was, but it was it was like unreal. I literally like it when once she said, "Does anybody want to accept Jesus?" It was like the wind got knocked out of me, and I had to catch my breath and gain my composure a little bit. And then Beth just said a prayer and led over 1,000 people into God's kingdom for the first time.
Yeah, amen.
And sharing this story, it might be easy to think, well, you just got done saying that it's not big things, that it's just little things done with great love. But this big thing, when that happened, there were so many things that went through my emotions and my mind. And it wasn't just this, like, man, we are here and this is grandiose. All of those little things started coming to my mind of the hard work, the times where it was like, man, I'm so tired of fundraising. We got houseboats and there's, this is just an extra thing. All these things that made me want to like just give up. All of these things that happened in leaving my family and people sending their kids and dealing with worried parents, all these things were these little steps that led to this one moment. And so you guys played kind of what my heart is, and what I want to share is that you guys played such a huge part in that. And we want you to see that. We want you to know that, because it would not have happened if we didn't have all of those little things done out of great love. It would not have happened if my wife wouldn't have said, yes, go away from your 1 and 3-year-old for 2 weeks. It wouldn't have happened if the parents didn't say, we're going to trust in this process and let our kids go. It wouldn't have happened if you guys didn't donate. It wouldn't have happened if we didn't have elders and the support of Mountain View that said, this is a huge financial burden, but we want to just send you. And so you guys played a huge part in thinking of those small things. When you look at the small things, sometimes it's easier. Like Jeanne said, it gives hope. At one point in the trip, we climbed this mountain Coma, which is it's not the easiest hike. The kids, the first time I went, they told me, oh yeah, it's no big deal. And it's really hard. And it's about like halfway up that you just see this just ginormous mountain. And it takes about 3.5 hours, 4 hours round trip. And it's not the distance, it's the fact that half the time you're literally like scaling up the side of this mountain. And I remember I stayed back with a few people that were just taking their time. And then they decided to stay about halfway. And I was like, I'm going to catch up to the group. And I remember getting like halfway to where it really started to get hard. And I remember looking up and just going, it looked like little dots. Our team were just little dots climbing up this mountain. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to make it. And my legs were already weak, like out of shape. And so I'm like climbing, and I was like, man. And every time I looked up, I'd get overwhelmed. And I wanted to just turn around. And then I said, man, I'm just going to worry about the steps. And I just looked at my feet. Literally was just looking at my feet and watching where my hands go, and kept on climbing up and moving and moving. And it was like no time had passed at all. And I looked back, and it was just this huge view. And the people that I had left were these little dots. And I went, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And before I knew it, if I just concentrate and I just kept on going, I was like, I heard Abusa, and our bus driver was there like going, and I was like right there. And it hit home with me, and with this verse being said, or this quote being so heavy on our hearts about there's no great things, it's just the small things. And sometimes when we have our eye, and it's good to have vision, and it's good to know and be inspired, but a lot of times it's just those small things, and we just do the small things with great love. And if you just concentrate on those, you can accomplish all. And it was so amazing. And it really was that, like, if I just concentrated, and for us in our lives, it's like, what are those big things that we want to see that we prevent ourselves from doing? But that if we just do the small things in love, in Philippians 4:13, when we lean into Christ, it says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And when you focus on God accomplishing those tasks, then anything's possible. And that was kind of the theme. And that was so cool for me to know, because like Jeanne said, it can be super discouraging. And the thing that was on my heart is that we all have something that we're called to. And it's God giving us that commission of, I want you to go. I want you to go out, not to just be huddled here in San Juan Capistrano, but I want you to go. And each of us, every single person in here has a go. Maybe it's just your family. And sometimes we get discouraged. It's like, well, I'm not called to Malawi, so I'm not going. But we don't have to go to Malawi. That is like so far from what anybody has to do. But all of us have something that we're called to. And having that go and identifying that go, and maybe it's your family, maybe it's the community that you live in, your neighbors. Maybe God's saying, go, be my light out in your neighborhood. Or maybe it's a ministry here. All of us have a go. But just like on that mountain, there's sometimes it's easy to get discouraged, or there's things that hold us back. And Jeanne experienced that on the trip firsthand.
Yeah. So I didn't make it to the top of the mountain. I chose to stay about in the middle, and I did it out of logic. You know, I have this condition where I can go into anaphylactic shock, which is a life-threatening allergic reaction, and it happens for no reason. And I just know that sometimes it seems like it's brought on by extreme exercise, and I love to exercise, and I do it all the time. But I just thought wasn't sure I wanted to take that risk in Africa on the top of this mountain if I didn't have to take the risk, right? Makes sense. It seems logical and all that. But it's kind of fear-based, really, you know? And I knew it, but I just thought I'm just going to play it safe, you know? And I enjoyed my view from where I was. And, you know, I don't think God's unhappy with me because I didn't make it to the top. Nothing like that. But it was really interesting because on the 25-hour flight home, in the last 45 minutes, I'm sitting there with my little earplugs in, watching a movie, enjoying myself, and all of a sudden I start to have the reaction. And I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. I'm kind of in shock right now. And that is what's happening. My body's going into shock. So I don't always think very clearly. And so I thought, well, maybe it'll just go away. Maybe it'll just stop right here, and I don't need the EpiPen. It'll all be fine. And I started getting off the plane, and the symptoms started increasing, so I thought I better tell Brick because I don't always think clearly. And then I just thought, I just got an EpiPen and be done with this. This is ridiculous. And so I did, and I thought about it a lot afterwards and thought, so funny that would happen in the last 45 minutes of the trip. And I didn't go up to the mountain because I was afraid. And it just made me think as we were preparing for this message, what holds us back from being, from the go? What holds us back? Is it fear? Is it, thinking we can control our life? I mean, I couldn't have controlled that situation. God knows the number of my days, right? And he reminded me of that. He said, I got you. I know the number of your days. And you don't need to be afraid. Is it insecurity? Is it you thinking that you don't have a story to tell, or that you don't have enough to make a difference? Because that's just flat out not true. I looked at these girls sharing their testimony, and that was just such a life changer for me. Actually, a lot of the kids, there was another kid, Riley, who full on shared the gospel, and he totally didn't want to, and he did, and changed lives that night. It's like, is it insecurity? Because God is enough, and he lives inside of us, right? So what do we have to be insecure about? We couldn't have a better person on our team, right? Anything's possible. Everything's possible, So is there some lie that we're buying into that, gosh, I can protect myself by not climbing up the mountain? As my husband always says, you could step off the curb and get hit by the pie truck, So that's an old saying, you guys probably know what the pie truck is, but... But, it's true. And it's like, at what point are we just going to grab a hold of God's hand and go, I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to trust you. And I'm telling you, it is the greatest adventure. It's just like, it's the greatest adventure walking with God like that.
And it was so cool to see Jeanne go. And it was awesome seeing... They call her a go-go, which means grandma. So she was like a celebrity because of her
white hair.
Yeah. They're like, a go-go, because they're all these youth kids. But she did amazing. And that's what happens when we don't let those things, and every single one of those kids had those things, and they overcame it. And they saw their go. For them, it was Malawi, and they went. And so Jeanne and I are just hoping and praying that us as a church start to live that out of what is our go as a church, as families, as a youth ministry, and start walking in those and doing away with those insecurities. And so it's the small things done with great love that add up to these amazing things. And the last thing that I was want to share and was reminded of was every time we leave a group in Malawi, there's time spent with these partners, and then when we leave, the people in Malawi say goodbye like a lot different than we do. I'm super casual, so half of the time it's just like, all right, see you guys later, like with a high school group. And for them, when they say goodbye, it's just this like, someone stepped out of the Bible, mixed a little bit with like a Yoda-ish type of a thing, where they like give you these words of insane wisdom. I'm like writing notes as they're saying goodbye. And, they'll stop and they'll say, I am so humbled. And you're just like, oh gosh, this is insane. All our team is just like looking like, people just don't say goodbye like that. And then they go with this long like monologue about how amazing and affirming and like all these cool things. And there's this one guy, Aubrey, that he was saying goodbye to us. And he stops and he just says, I'm so humbled by your team and what you're doing. And I want you to know that we are one, that we are the same, that we are one team, we are one body. And then he concluded and he said, I want you to know, he says that I assure you that my prayers will take me where my feet cannot go. He said, my prayers will take me where my feet cannot go. And as you sit in the U.S., know that I am with you because of his prayers. And gave me goosebumps again, because I'm like, man, how powerful is that he loves God so much and he loves us so much, and that I know that he is here with us because I know he's praying for us. And so as a church, we have this community, this body that's so much bigger than Mountain View. And as believers, if we could just be in prayer with the people around us, be in prayer for our communities, and allow our hearts and our prayers to take us to places that we cannot go, because our feet can't go. A lot of us, our feet physically couldn't get us to Malawi. We have too much responsibility or too many things or that's just not where God wants us. But every single one of us can go there in our prayers. Every single one of us can come alongside them and go to bat and be at war for them, because amazing things happening in Malawi and in all different places in the world. And the one thing that kept on coming up to me is that, like, man, we're so blessed as a community. And prayer is by far the biggest thing that we can offer. But I know for me personally, there's so much more that I can offer. And I had God, that phrase was put on my heart of, my prayers will take me where my feet cannot go. And I took out the word prayers, because that should be the core of what we do. I started thinking of the other things. What else can take me to where we cannot go? And maybe and for a lot of you guys, that's what it was. You guys, literally, your feet could not go, but you were there just as much as we were, because your support took you. Some of you guys, it was your finances. Some of you guys, it was, like I said, allowing your student or your spouse to go. And so what is it that we have that we can reach places that our feet just cannot go? And I was reminded of that, and that would be a challenge for you guys this morning. And one of the things that we do through World Vision is that we have the child sponsorships, and it's a way that literally something so small can literally go there. And Jeanne experienced this. I always felt like, I give my $40 a month or whatever, and there's probably 10 people that sponsored the same kid, and they didn't probably really exist, but they have a picture of them. Or I had all these sorry, maybe just my skepticism, but that was what I thought. But I remember the first time I went in 2006 and sitting face to face with my sponsored child, I was like, man, this is amazing. And Jeanne got to meet some of her sponsored children too.
I got to do that. We've been sponsoring 3 kids for a little over 10 years. And like I said, I've always wanted to go, so I was just super excited to meet our kids. And the very first one that I went to go meet, I got to stand up because I get kind of antsy. The first one that I went to go meet was Hilda, and she's 13. And as I was walking up to her house, I was walking with an interpreter, and her name was Chimeme, which means happiness. And I could feel myself getting emotional because I'm just kind of an emotional gal. And but I mean, I'd waited so long to meet them, you know, it was just such an honor to meet them. And I'm walking up and I could feel myself start to cry. And so I look at Jeanne and I go, is it okay if I cry? And she goes, no. And I mean, like, you know, they won't understand that. And I go, well, these are tears of joy. And when I explained to her, and I couldn't quell it, you know. And I'm walking up to this, it's like a kind of a one hut room, and with a thatched roof, and Hilda's there, and she comes out, and she's so excited to see me. And when they see you, they handshake like this. It's like, and then they hug you, you know. But it's not like a little, you know, it's not that. It's like a hearty handshake. And I hugged her, met her family, you know, and she told me how she stayed out of school that day to meet me, and that she'd been waiting all day. And I said, I've been waiting for 10 years. I was just so happy to see her. They're so joyful with so little. It's just inspiring. You can't help but just be inspired by them. And so I found out she didn't like school, and I gave her gifts, and I found out that her father had died and that they were really struggling. And her mom came out, and her mom said that she really missed her husband so much, and she kind of touched her chest like this, like her heart still hurts, and she said, we wouldn't be able to make it without your help. And I thought, here I just kind of, before going on the trip, I looked at them like, okay, yeah, we're helping. I get a picture once in a while. I write a letter occasionally. I knew it was a good thing, but it was like, now they're real people to me with real problems. And some of them similar to ours, but like so magnified as far as a lot of things go. But so my second child was Leah, and he's a 15-year-old boy, and his parents just split. And so he's kind of between houses, and he goes back and forth. So when we went to find him, we're driving down these dirt roads, and we think we get to his house. It's his mom's house, but he has run to his father's. So in the meantime, he ran back to us, and we're kind of missing each other. And finally, we find him, and you know, find out he loves math and that he's struggling because of his parents split, but, you know, he's got his 2 older brothers there, and I gave him some gifts, a little pocket knife with little tools on it, and showed him how to use it, and it was just awesome. And so during this time of these child visits, I met another go-go, your grandma, and she could identify with me right away. And she pointed at my shoes as we were walking down this path. And so I just knew I was supposed to give her my shoes. So at the end of the path, I gave her my shoes. And I thought, I'm just going to do the rest of my visits in my socks, you know. I'm kind of patting myself on the back, you know. And that was a nice thing. And so I go to meet our third child, Himalita. She's 15 also. And it was like one of the most remote villages, like one of the first villages that World Vision came to. And she had to walk a long ways to meet up with us, and we had to walk a long ways to meet up with her because the roads were so bad. And so we start walking, and we had to cross a stream, and we had to cross a little log ravine thing, and Jeanne, our interpreter, is going, I wasn't in for a hike, you know, and I'm thinking, well, I really wasn't either in my socks. I wasn't thinking about really crossing streams, you know. And Himalita walked all this way, and when we get to her, she could tell her brow's all sweaty, and she's sick with malaria. And she has like this high fever and really bad headache. And I'm thinking I'm so great that I'm hiking through a stream, and she hikes down there with malaria. She feels terrible, but she's smiling big, and she's happy to see me, and so grateful and so appreciative. And it was just the best shot just to meet these beautiful people and have just a few minutes of their time just to pray with her. We prayed together for her and for her family, and just we're one in spirit, you know. And it's like I feel like I carry that one in spirit back now, and I want to tell you that if you're sponsoring kids, they're real, and they really appreciate it. They appreciate your prayers. One of the kids I visited was a good friend of mine's child, and her father also had passed, and she said, we really need your prayers. Like, your prayers are really powerful. And so it kind of takes us back to what Aubrey said, you know, it's like your prayers can take you where your feet can't go. Your support of those people can take you where your feet can't go. And we just thank you for all that you've done to make this trip possible. And I want you to know it's making a huge, huge difference.
It totally is. And I was just reminded of a kid we met in the supermarket.
Oh, yeah.
We were getting loaves of bread, and this is not in the bush area, but about a couple hours towards the city. And this guy was just super eager to help us, and he knew a little bit of English. And he said, and he was very helpful. And he was just, I don't know.
Spoke really well.
Spoke good English, and he was helping us out. And Jeanne, you can tell the story way better than I can.
Yeah, so we were.
Well,
apparently he has family in Nkoma, which is one of the villages that we have a lot of sponsored kids in, and that we spent the most time in. And his family had benefited from child sponsorship, and he told us, "You have no idea what your visits mean to these kids. It gives them the encouragement to continue on in their studies. When they get a visitor, or even a letter, they get encouraged to keep going, to keep battling on, and it encourages them. It gives them a boost to keep going on, and despite the difficulty."
Yeah, and then I think he even stuck around a little bit, and I think it was Kenzie and Matt, where he said, when you guys come, it gives them a reason to live. They can continue to live. And it was just one of those things that's like, oh my gosh, like so amazing. And so...
and I think that's so impactful, because I know I even thought this back years ago when we first started doing it. Well, why spend all that money to go there? You could just send them the money. These people are so relational. Like our relationship with them matters more than our money, really, even. The fact that we would care, that we would travel all that way to see them, that we would invest in them. Like it's a relational part that just really is the deal cincher. It's the money is huge, don't get me wrong, but the relationship there is even bigger.
Yeah. And so we just, like Jeanne said, we want to just report and say thank you. This is what the support of Mountain View and you and all these fundraisers and all the things that I've already said, this is why. And it would not have been possible without you. And so as we go through this series of story, this is a part of our story. And one of the things, we did this construction project, and we were taking mud, and we were plastering the walls with our hands. And the youth pastor at the end, when we were debriefing, and he said his goodbye with all these crazy words, he said, he goes, your fingerprints are forever here, and Mountain View's fingerprints will forever echo through eternity. Kids are going to be coming to Jesus and learning about God because of that. And that was paid for and supported by you guys. And so that is Mountain View's story. That's God's story. And so thank you as the leader of that team. Thank you for everything that you've done. And just be encouraged that next week what we're going to do is we're going to have sponsorship packets. A lot of the packets that we had expired, which means that they just keep them up to date. So they're giving us new packets. We're going to have them next week. And so if it's on your heart to give, then awesome. And but for everybody here, we all have a go, and we all have little things. And remember that it's the small things done with great love. And so many people in this room have done things that are small that they don't know have a huge impact. But this is the impact. So thank you, and look forward to what God's doing, because I know that God's going to do some huge things through just inspiring everybody. And in a couple weeks, I think we're going to have the main video that has everything, all the ins and outs, and we'll have testimonies from the students and all that stuff. So let me just pray. God, we thank you so much for this morning. Lord, I thank you that you have given us so much, that we are so blessed by what you've done in our own lives, just as individuals. God, and I thank you for this experience of Malawi. I thank you for this story that's unfolding in the lives of these students. And Lord, I pray for each person here this morning, whether they physically gave or through prayer gave to this trip. Lord, this is one body. And I just pray that you would just show each and every single person here this morning the part that they play in your story, your bigger story. God, it's not about us or our families or Mountain View, but God, you are doing just incredible things in this world, and we're humbled to be a part of it. Lord, I pray that you would encourage us, that you would give us vision, that you would give us dreams, but Lord, that we wouldn't get caught up or discouraged or overwhelmed, but that we would concentrate on the little things that we can do in love. And that through that, Lord, that you would just start a wave, a movement through this church, that we would get outside of ourselves, that we would go beyond these doors, and that we would really impact our communities, our neighborhoods, and God, that you would make Mountain View just a pillar in this community. God, again, we love you and we thank you, and we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.